Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. It's a chilly day here in the old Pueblo. Woke up this morning, was around 29 degrees, but I felt very warm inside because I knew that I was going to have an opportunity to get a chance to hang with a guy who I've always admired from afar. Kind of a very cerebral musician in the sense that you don't ever see him trying to force anything. You get the idea that he's constantly looking to get his ego out of the way so that he can become a conduit for information coming through him from the heavens. And the people that he has worked with throughout his career on the bandstand and in the studio also recognize this. And like any musician in today's world, in order to sing for your supper, you have to play live. There is no intellectual property rights to speak of anymore. I mean, it's somewhat laughable. There is no studio scene, which my guest would have easily been a part of back in the 70s with all the string instruments that he could play. The only thing really left for musicians is to tour live and make money on the merch tables. And as we know, live, spiritual, communal music has kind of been pushed to the side during the pandemic. And I think now, more than ever, I can just say that this year for me, I'm all in for the Cats. I understand what's at stake. I am going to liberate and heal through the music of people like my guest. And I just hope and pray that venues get the memo about not just putting on music, but also compensating the musicians for the geniuses that they are. Jesse Aycock, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks for having me, Jake. Good to talk with you, man.
Yeah, man. You know, I just got to tell you, man, I'm very dear friends. I speak to them probably once a week. But you are from one of the biggest bastions of music, the home of Jimmy Lee Keltner. And obviously we know that, Leon Russell went back there. There was a whole bunch of badass black jazz musicians that came out of there, like Ronnie Beck moved to the West Coast. But did you grow up in Tulsa?
Yeah, I was born and raised here. And still calling it home.
Was there a black part of town that was still prevalent? This may be way before your time. Probably it was before my time, but I know that the White Cats had to go to the black part of town. That's where the music was swinging. I just wasn't sure what kind of, if you had to seek that music out growing up, if you did seek it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of this. A lot of this town that's kind of been, a lot of this town's history and past that's been buried in a lot of ways. And so, growing up, I grew up in the north side of town, which has historically been more African American.
Absolutely, North Tulsa. Holy shit!
Yeah. So I grew up in a different sort of scene, but when I was younger. A lot of my neighborhood friends and stuff, like, rap, like hip hop and rap was like the thing, for that age group and stuff at that time. And so I actually listened to a lot of that stuff, and still do. But like growing up in a family that, with my dad being a singer-songwriter and like a big folk, fan. And I mean, he has a very diverse, he has very diverse tastes, but having that sort of upbringing, I really sort of latched on to that stuff. And as you get deeper into music, you just go further and further out and seek things out. And I becoming like a record junkie, it's like you start, you deeper you get into that, you start looking at credits and where things were recorded and made. And then, so you get into the historical part of records, and then that's really when I started sort of getting deeper into like what Tulsa's musical history was. And and I still to this day I'm always anytime I go to an antique mall or anything, I'm like searching out for 45s because there's all these weird. There was like a ton of these like little tiny record labels in Oklahoma that were just recording singles for artists that maybe they only made one single. I mean, a lot of it was Western swing, but there's some soul. I scored this Ted Taylor 45.
Oh dear! Wait, I'm sorry. Who was that cat? I don't even know who that cat is.
Oh man, he's badass. You should definitely seek him out.
Oh my God, dude!
He's an Oklahoma guy that moved. I think he moved out west at some point, but he was around. I found like a black grass 45.
I need you to stop right there because I'm telling you, Jesse, on my amplifier at home, and I was going to say after the show, give me your address. I have an LP of black grass, Tijuana Studios, Oklahoma. Keltner's on drums. There's some preacher, Reverend cat on there. It is unreal, dude. If you don't, I have the full album. I'll send it to you if you want the full album.
I actually do have it.
You have black rat, dude. I'm telling you, man. I saw that. It's just for the audience. It's like some cat, like there's like a foot on the cover, and they're about to step on an armadillo or something. I don't even know what the cover's like, but I mean, black grass. I can't believe you just dropped that, man. Because I just found that.
That's so cool. You got it, man. There's, it's a neat record, and that was like all part of sort of Leon's entourage of people.
Absolutely.
But man, there's just it's like the further I go, I mean, and there's always been a cool crossover between Oklahoma musicians and like California musicians, because it's like there's always been this interplay between Okies going back and forth to California, and there's like a weird connection there that I've really started to notice. Like Don Cherry too, another jazz guy. Was he dwelling in Tulsa?
He wasn't from there, was he?
He wasn't a Tulsa guy, but I think he was OKC, or he was from around.
Wow.
He was an Oklahoma guy for a while and stuff. But I mean, there's just all these people you sort of kind of connect the dots.
You know who was like, but I mean. Yeah, like even a cat like Fred Tackett. I mean, he grew up in Arkansas, but he was cooking the groove in Oak City for a long time. Oklahoma's been a hotbed of, and you're right, that interplay with Cale and Leon and all those guys going back. I mean, I just thought it was some of the most badass stuff that they would actually come back and sort of create their own communities. I mean, how much of that, Jesse, like, I just spoke to George Sluppick yesterday, and he's in Greensboro, North Carolina with Charlie Hunter. I mean, he's like, I don't want to, like, I've done the road gigs. It's exhausting. I'm burned out. Like, I'm not making a lot of money the last couple of years, but I have a roommate. But you know what? This is a good vibe. Like, we're trying to build a community. We have a jazz school here in Greensboro, and it's like the light bulb kind of went on, and I was like, that's kind of, to me, like there is no roadmap coming out of this thing, and I'm not trying to be daunting or put it on your shoulders alone, but do you think that there is a strong musical community to rebuild or start from scratch, led by Jesse Aycock in Tulsa?
Well, I mean, excuse me, that's kind of been something that's been slowly kind of building that way for years, and it's not just myself, but it's something that I've definitely been a part of, and it's part of what's kept me in this town. And it's even George and I still talk, and even before he moved to Greensboro, that seems like a really good move for him, and especially he's playing with Charlie Hunter, who's one of the baddest, and it's like
totally
it's a great gig. And I totally get that whole thing of being somewhere where there's like the beginning of a scene, or it's something that feels like it can be built upon and you can be part of it, and it's not so overly saturated or whatever. And I know at one point, he was considering moving here, and he was sort of like, man, I know Tulsa's got a bunch of good drummers, but you think if I moved there, I'd get, work. And I was like, of course, man. Like, there's enough to go around, especially with your skills, but it's it's there's still a lacking element here. And it's like, and it's always been the case. And it's like, I don't know what it is, but the music scene, since I started playing in clubs and stuff in my, when I was in like 20 and stuff, it's like, it wasn't really that great back then. There was some really great bands and great musicians, but as far as it being a very like communal feel, it didn't really have that in so much. And even when I talk to some of my older musician friends that have been gigging since the 70s around here, they're like, man, like even then it's like there was a little bit more of this competitive edge in the air amongst a lot of the players. And I kind of felt that vibe more when I started playing. And nowadays I don't really get that at all. And it's like, I'm sure that still goes on in certain scenes and stuff, but it's like so communal in it. And it's like, and it's really been great to see. And it's like, there's a bunch of, there's just some musicians here that are just, world class, and they kind of get overlooked in a lot of ways just because it's Tulsa, and it's like, it's on the map. I mean, it's, if you're a musician, if you're somebody like yourself that, knows like, music history, then you sort of understand that. But it's like, for everyone else, it kind of just slips off the radar.
Total. No, it's, first of all, when you talk about your elders and the older cats, there was a lot of work to go around in the early 70s, and it was a competitive thing, but it was like a friendly competition. Everybody was kind of pulling for everybody else. This is what I asked Sluppick yesterday. He told me a legendary story. I would ask you about the same thing because, for the audience, Jesse Aycock, I've seen him live a couple of times playing different types of string instruments. He's kind of like a modern day David Lindley kind of cat. And, I asked Sluppick this yesterday. Can you talk about early on in your career, for lack of a better word, an ass kicking you took on the bandstand? And what I mean by that is, basically being humbled. And, I've talked to so many guys. I don't know, Denny Sywell from Wings was kicked off the bandstand by Lou Donaldson because he couldn't play a shuffle. There were guys on the bandstand from a different generation where it was an apprenticeship. Like it was blood, sweat, and tears. And some of it required you overcoming a lot of adversity to get back on the bandstand. But it was like affirmation. Once you did that and proved it to yourself and made you a stronger musician, stronger person. Did you have an experience like that as a younger cat where, I don't know, you got pushed out of your comfort zone, maybe got humbled that night, but then came back and said, I'm better off for it?
Yeah, I found myself in that situation multiple times. Sometimes, a lot of times I purposely put myself there so I can grow as an artist. And it's, the first time I think I played electric guitar in front of an audience was hilarious because I had this teacher, Leon Rollerson, who's a character himself from Tulsa.
Yeah, I might need to talk to that guy, dude. Yeah.
He's a trip, and he's and so he comes from like this more like blues R&B world, and he said, I want you to come out and play with my band this weekend at the Greenwood Cultural Center. And I was like, all right, that sounds good. I was like, but what do you want me to play? And he's like, man, you'll know what to play. You just go up there. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm good enough on guitar to just sit in with your band. And he said, your first lesson is, he's like, if you don't know what you're doing, then just don't play. And he's like, just dress sharp. And he's like, and look like you know what you're doing. And so I just like, I sat up there and kind of air guitar played with his band for, like half of a set. And it was funny because I just really didn't know what I was doing, but I did exactly what he told me. But I thought, man, I got to figure out, I can't just go up here and I look silly up here, air guitar, you
Dude,
know.
that's
so,
like Jake Feinberg,
you
man.
know.
Unbelievable, dude.
Yeah. So there is that, but I mean, there's this guitar player who's he's kind of a legend in Tulsa. He's kind of, every town has one of these characters that is like sort of the town's unsung hero, and like all the musicians sort of look up to this guy, but he never really was like crazy famous or something. And you know, and unfortunately, he's also one of the guys that falls in the category of he, you know, had substance abuse issues, and he was sort of one of those guys that as soon as he got something really good going, he would self-sabotage. And
totally.
But he's this guitar player named Steve Pryor, and the first time I heard him, my dad took me to see him, and I had never seen anything like that or heard anything like that. And he influenced a lot of guitar players in this town, almost all of them that I'm friends with. And he really influenced me because he also played pedal steel as well. And he was the only guy I knew at the time that was really doing that in town. And he actually, a little interesting Tulsa history part was, you know, he came from this blues rock world. And at the time, like I think he did a show with Stevie Ray Vaughan right before Stevie Ray Vaughan got famous, but he got a record deal, went out to California, and I mean, it was like at the time when they were still giving out actual record deals.
Absolutely,
and they got a good amount of money,
yeah,
you know, and he had a great band, and they had showcases and they did some touring, but he just couldn't hold it together. And so, you know, as those things go, it fell apart. But when he came back to Tulsa, he moved into a house and happened to be neighbors with Reed Mathis.
Oh my God, dude, Reed, the legend, man.
Yeah, and so Reed's
my God,
Reed's a legend around this town as well. And
my God,
especially all the jazz guys, like, you know, idolize him. And I mean, I've always looked up to Reed in many ways, but so. And he ends up being neighbors with Reed, and they end up having another musical friend that's nearby. So they just start jamming and like writing songs. And so they started this band called The Neighbors, and Steve Pryor played pedal steel and guitar in the band, and it was some of the best music to come out of this town. But it, you know, once again, it's him, and he's a wild card, and I think at some point it just sort of fell apart. But there's still there's a record. It's not under The Neighbors, but Sean Layton was the main writer and drummer, and sang a lot of the songs. And I think Reed put together like a retrospective. It's the Sean Layton retrospective, and
I saw that stuff. I saw that. Oh, dude, so there's some cuts on there from The Neighbors.
Yeah, so most of that stuff is The Neighbors. There's a couple Jacob Fred songs.
Yeah, Brian Haas, another legendary Tulsa cat. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple from that, but most of that stuff is The Neighbors.
Wow.
So
wow.
It's really
wow.
So that band was hot, and they were like sort of the band to see, and that was like, you know, I'm a little younger, and I was just almost at the point where I could go see them live, but I was never able to see that band. But Steve, I was able to see, and he was a guitar player that was so good, it was like kind of like terrifying.
Sure.
And
yeah.
and exhilarating at the same way. And like, so we became friends over the years, and you know, to get back to kind of what you were asking, I just
that's fine.
He asked me to sit in with him, and I ended up sitting in with him a handful of times, but the first time I sat in with him, I was like just super nervous and scared. Like I hadn't felt like that in a long time, because I just felt so like out of place as far as like what should I do. And so, I mean, it's kind of how I've like approached my musical sort of approach, I guess. Like the whole time is just, you know, I'm like, well, I'll just not play much. You know, I'll play it's like I'm not, I don't play like him, and I probably will never play like him. So I'm just going to try to stay out of the way and like compliment the song as much as I can. And so that's what I've always kind of done. But still the first time playing with him was just kind of like a frightening thing. It's like hopping on a train that's going full speed ahead and it's like about to derail, and it's just like, whoa, holy shit, like, hold on, here we go.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's what it's about, man. I mean, like, would you say that that's carried over? For me, I don't care what genre it is. I really want to see cats going for it, like playing beyond what they know. And that doesn't mean you have to play like 400 bars. I mean, it's just like, it could be a little solo. But I mean, how would you say that in your mind? I want you to talk to younger cats, especially. Not that you're an old cat.
Yeah.
But, what are the antecedents in your mind in a band for creating spiritual music?
I think just everybody is playing for the song, and if you're playing for the song, then it's like that's how it will reach people and connect in that way, I think. And I mean, it's a tough, I mean, it can be a struggle. It's like, I feel like, music is spiritual in nature. It's just that, like, it's easy to lose track of that sometimes. And it's like, the pandemic really kind of, it put a lot of things in perspective for me. And I just feel like I'm kind of diving deeper musically than I ever have. And I think it's like partly, and it's tapping into that more spiritual side of it. And it's just like, because I feel like you get stuck in these holes, and sometimes I kind of got into this place where I'm like, I don't even know if I care as much anymore. Like, it's just like things got weird, and I just sort of got to this place where I kind of felt really kind of low. And after kind of being stuck in that for a while, it's like I had a decision to make, I felt like, and it's like either I just sort of kind of decide that I'm going to like sort of chill out with this and like take a little breather, or I'm going to just go full head first and really embrace this more than I ever have. And I kind of chose that second route. And so it's like, I'm not saying there's still gigs that sometimes I can get kind of bummed on or something. It's like if it's, playing a weekly gig that, there's hardly anyone there, or like there's no one paying much attention or something weird. Like sometimes that stuff can get to you after a while, but then it's like I've gotten to this point now where it's like I'm just trying to pull it from within, no matter what the situation is. And then also with my musician friends that I'm on stage with, and like just trying to, if anything, just feed each other and like sort of like try to like encourage and tap into something, no matter what the situation and the vibe.
What a kind of like when you've gone down the rabbit hole as opposed to taking a break, or you'll see everyone has their own way of, I mean, whoever saw this coming, but have you been working on like exploring new musics or your chops, or like a little bit of both? Like what has the rabbit hole looked like?
Well, it's a lot of different things. I mean, creatively, I've been working on an instrumental record like since the whole thing started, just at my house, and it's kind of just one of those things where I'm not in any rush to finish it because there's no need. But it's like, to me, it's being instrumental. It speaks differently than vocal music, and it's something I've been really into a lot in the last like 5 years, and it just touches people in a different way. And so the important thing about really all music, but especially this instrumental stuff, is like I really feel like it has to be inspired, and or it's like, so I'm not in any rush. It's like I'm just sort of recording whenever it feels right.
I dig.
And it's very organic. And
would you say, like, can you talk a little bit about, like, I mean, that's the music I love the most. Is just like improvisational instrumental music. Would you say it's like, is it all you? Do you have other people play? What kind of instrumentation is on it?
Right now, it's all me,
Yeah.
and it's not because it's like I wouldn't want other people on it, but it's just the way it's kind of
absolutely.
It's like since I started it in the pandemic when everything was totally shut down. It's just how it started, and it's like, it's just all me, and it's really I'm trying to keep it. I want to kind of keep it guitar focused in a way, and but I want it to not have like too many crazy layers. I mean, some songs might have more, but it's really, I'm just trying to create space, and it's like I love the ambient element of a lot of instrumental music, so I want it to be sort of like hypnotic, and so it's really just guitar and bass, and then I've done some like sort of like programmed live drum thing on a couple, and then some sort of like, and then played some piano on stuff, but it's really pretty simple in that sense, and some pedal steel, on a few. So
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, looking back, it's funny for me. I mean, sometimes you get into this fog or this cloud of like confusion just because things. Well, I assume because nobody was getting filthy rich as a musician before the pandemic, but I know people were busy, like really busy. And so I just like, it's funny, I've looked back on this period of time and it didn't feel like I was incredibly productive and whatever metrics you use, but I look back and I'm like, damn, I did a lot. I mean, you feel like you've grown regardless of the sort of madness that we're all encountering cognitively, psychically. I mean, putting that aside, do you feel like you've been productive and made grown a little bit during this time?
Oh, for sure. I mean, in many ways, and like I said, I've got like I've kind of just come to a better perspective on things, and it's like, and it is weird when you, like you said, when you look back, it is great. It's mind blowing sometimes.
It's mind blowing
because
it's mind blowing
when you're in the middle of it, it just feels normal. But looking back, and if I really sort of consolidate the years before leading up to it, I'm just like it looks insane. I'm like, I was doing all kinds of stuff and like I feel like I lived like 3 lifetimes in that span. Like it's just insane.
Right. You're talking about pre-pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's just wild. And so I'm like sort of, it's with the brakes being slammed on, it's kind of wild, and it's like, but I've really kind of gotten introspective because of it, and it's been good in a lot of ways, and difficult at times. And it's like, I mean, part of this, part of this whole thing, it's like it pulled out, there's been a lot of things that have been dealing with over the last few years, and it's like I finally, ended up going to therapy for a little while, which was really helpful. And it's like, and thanks to Music Cares and the Neil Foundation, the Neil Cassell Music Foundation, it's like I was able to get some help with that stuff, and kind of just help get me back on track. And it's like, it's, some of these things are difficult because it's it's like even I've struggled with like depression and stuff like throughout my life, and I've been on medication for it once, but it actually worked. And so it's like for years, I haven't been on anything. And it's like with this, you know, I love when you can just take care of things naturally. I'm still like I'm a gardener, and I'm like into herbs and whatever natural healing you can do. But you know, sometimes things are just like,
hey man, you're preaching to the choir, man. I mean, dude. I mean, I think psychotherapy is essential for everybody, even though most people think there's a stigma to it. And as far as Western pharmaceuticals, I realize there's a lot of ambivalence. People like yourself or naturopaths, but without it, I wouldn't be here. So I mean, you know, I just feel like a lot. You know, you got to be vulnerable. I appreciate you being honest, and I hope that people that hear this recognize that I know what you're saying, man. The Western pharmaceuticals, there's a lot of nasty, bad stuff going on. In some of it, but it centers me and allows me to be a productive, sane person. And I'm not on a lot, right. But it's like I don't want people to think that. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that try to push through that depression because they're so pure about the organic nature of things, and you come up short. But that, you know, that's a whole other ball of wax. I'm glad. I'm really glad. Listen, you know, bottom line is, I read somewhere you're like, you know, when things are falling apart, you got to just lean into something. You know, lean into music, lean into the pain. But Jesse, you know, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to take a listen to this, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
Well, I started playing music in like the youth group in my church. You know, they had sort of like a band for like teenagers. You know, and it was like the kind of church where they had like kind of contemporary music, which I kind of realized in retrospect. Interestingly enough, there was a guy that I idolized who played guitar in the adult band that basically looked like he was super into Dylan period, like Saved albums.
Oh,
you know,
my
like
God. Who was it? Who was it?
He's the only guy in the church that smoked, you know, like, he was such a badass. He played an awesome Fender Stratocaster.
I love this dude.
But anyways, in retrospect now, I look back, I'm like, man, that guy wore indoor sunglasses all the time at church, you know, you know, he kind of was channeling a Bob Dylan thing, and all the songs they're written in the 80s that they played. So it was kind of that period when like
Shot of Love, Saved, definitely, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's like when it became trendy for, you know, people that were going to acid parties. Now they're like been saved by Jesus, and now they're in church and all. You know, so
dude, you're 100%. Dude. Yeah, no, you were like, wow, there's somebody here who's not square, right? I mean, that was the point.
Yeah, it was like in a cool Jesus loving way, I guess.
Well, no, because anyway. I just want to, before you go on, I mean, I obviously babbled through that. You want to guess at who that is?
Well, the voice is so familiar, and I'm like,
I feel like you guys are like brethren, and maybe you probably have collaborated in some respect. You want to take a stab at it? I mean, I'll give you a clue. Is that?
Well, yeah. Is it John? Is that John Lee or?
Oh God,
John Lee Shannon.
You know what, dude? I mean, Aycock. I mean, you're like. I mean, that's if you could have picked his soul brother, you would have been right. That was Zephaniah O'Hara.
That was Zeph.
Zeph.
Right.
And I love that dude so much because he's talking about being in church and then seeing this guy in the adult band who's just totally like, you know, those late 70s Dylan years, you know, Saved and Slow Train Coming, and you know what it was about was like the, you know, basically being a conduit for the music to come through you from the heavens. And that sounds kind of lofty, but I mean, the truth is, man, when I see you play, I mean, whether it's with Kenny Roby or, you know, it could be in a duo setting or whatever it is, like, you know, it's almost like a yogic meditative experience. And I know your intentions have always been just to serve the song, but in general, I just kind of wanted you to talk about a time early on in your life, or just a time that comes to mind when you realized that that you were a musical healer, and that you know, if you could get out of your own way, and how you learned over time to be a conduit for the music to come through you.
I think I've always probably felt that to some degree, but honestly, it hasn't really been until it's been more the last couple of years, the last 2 or 3 years, in a way that I've embraced that place, and it's just one of those things where I think, like I said, I think you know it's there, and it's like music has always had that spiritual healing role in my life and in others' lives, and I've seen it, and I've experienced it for myself, and I've seen how music affects others that I'm part of, and so I've connected the dots before, but I think honestly, because of depression stuff and all that, it's like sometimes that it pulls you, it kind of pulls you internal sometimes that you have a harder time seeing outside of it, and
Absolutely.
I think really dealing with a lot of those issues has allowed me to kind of see things that clearly and have more intent with what I'm doing.
Can you just talk about Can you talk about? You said you finally embraced that space. What does that mean? That you've embraced it? You haven't. You're not running away from it.
It's more, yeah, and I'm not hiding from it, and I'm being more thoughtful, and it's like if I'm on my way to the gig driving, I kind of think about it, meditate. Once I'm setting up, once I get that guitar on, I really try to just get into that place. And it's like, you know, I'm sure sometimes people might wonder, or like, I don't know, maybe they don't at all, but if anything, maybe they are like, Jesse like never really looks up at the audience or at anybody, you know? And it's like, yeah. And it's just because I'm like wanting to give as much as I can. And in order for me to do that, it's like the way that I focus and can dive in is sometimes I just don't look up, you know?
Well, but I mean, who's the master of that. In fact, he'd turn his back on the audience is Miles Davis, because he didn't want to be affected. Being a sensitive person with manic behavior, he did not want to be affected by people's facial expressions. He turned his back on people, on the crowd.
Yeah.
You know, that keeps you that keeps you focused, and maybe more importantly, kind of keeps you in the moment, which is the most important thing.
Yes, it does for sure.
Well, I think that your experience is so right on, and I think that there's so many people right now. You know, I think it's important for people to be vulnerable. I just, again, going back to Sluppick yesterday, he talked about three of his. I mean, our conversation meandered into the CRB, and you know, he had three friends that took their lives, including Neely. And I don't, you know, yeah. I mean, I'm actually very. Although I might have missed a lot, because like just you talking to you and realizing how many underground musicians there are in Tulsa, I realize I don't know anything about, really, I don't know anybody. But I just feel like we've kind of come out of this, like you're a good example of somebody who's like gone internal, done a deep dive, gotten yourself mental help, haven't punished yourself. It seems like a lot of people there's been a lot of self-preservation. But that's it on the surface. And now, as we sort of move into this new terrain in such a hostile, polarized environment, I do worry about people moving forward. Was it hard for you to just get the help you needed? Or I just want you to talk a little bit about how critical it is for people to absolutely access the resources that are available, because we only live once. It goes really fast. And I look at cats like yourself and all my peers, and there's just so many chapters left to write, and it would be a shame to get so dark and not seek the resources. And I don't know, you can riff on that any way you want, but I know that people out there are suffering, even if they're putting on a good facade.
Yeah. I think, I mean, that's the most challenging part in all that is when you are in those places, it's sometimes hard to do anything. And it's a lot easier to put it off because it's like when you're that low, sometimes just the thought of even having to make a phone call to set up an appointment or to do this or that is overwhelming.
Absolutely.
And, I think it's really just doing one first step of just doing it. Just make a call, get something on a calendar, or just put, sometimes, it's like, it's sometimes I think it is like maybe a pride thing or something, and not with everyone, but I know for myself it has it with times where I'm like, I should be able to handle this on my own, and I don't need medication. I don't need this. Like, I should be able to figure it out. And then at some point you just have to say, I can't figure this out, or I can't do this, or I have no reason not to take medication. So it's like, and it's like, it's like shit. If my doctor was like, your genetic makeup is unfortunate because you have crazy high blood pressure and you're like pre-diabetic or whatever, so like you need to take these meds or else like it could be deadly. It's like most people don't blink an eye to do that.
Absolutely.
Kind of stuff. And it's like mental health and mental chemical stuff imbalances is like really kind of a similar thing. And it's like there's just more, I feel like there's become more of a stigma around it, and it's really just like it's like taking a blood thinner or something, or whatever. It's like
I would just offer. Yeah, I mean, I completely. I just tend to try to be my authentic self, and I just realize like my only advice to people is like it really helps you get through the day. Like you can just function. Like when if I miss my meds, or I've actually never gone cold turkey, but like. It's just there's such a drag on the energy and the vibe. Like you said, it's hard to just get. There's a classic jazz song, "I Can't Get Started," and that's just the way I feel. It's just like and even if you're doing something, you feel discombobulated. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of pride there. I just feel, and I'm not advocating for big pharma. I'm not trying to push anything on anybody, but especially the artist. I mean, have you been a hired gun a lot during this time? Have you traveled back to the West Coast? I mean, I know before you did, but have you done a lot of session work or stuff, maybe in solitude, but then, you can email cut and paste kind of thing. Have you done some work for people during this time?
Yeah. I have done session work. I haven't done a ton of traveling. I think the last major traveling I did was I went to Woodstock to film a music video with Kenny Roby.
That was a while ago. Yeah, I love that.
We did it for the Highway Butterfly record. And so that was in fall. I think did that in October. And so that was like the most traveling. I mean, that's the first time I think I'd been in an airplane since this whole thing started. And then other than that, I've done a few different records that I think are going to be really, really cool. There's this singer-songwriter Cassie Latshaw here in town that I did a record with. I mean, it was last year when we recorded it, but it's like the way things are. It's like been kind of slow going, but it's going to be really cool. And then recorded with this friend of mine, Joey Friendo. He's a new guy in town. He moved from Michigan, and I didn't know him before. And a friend of mine that I work with has a studio in Little Rock, Arkansas. Had worked with Joey and said, "Hey, man, this guy I know is moving to Tulsa, doesn't know anybody really, and you guys should hook up. And so we kind of met and just said hello and talked music. And then he's like, man, I wanted to make a record with you and some Tulsa guys. So we went to Little Rock and recorded with him. And then the last record I worked on was really a really amazing experience. It's with my friend John Fulbright, and we did this. Speaking of going back to Zeph's conversation, we there's this so this guy Steve Ripley, who's from Tulsa, was in the guitar player in the Shot of Love band with Bob Dylan.
That's right.
And he unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but
that's right.
His wife still lives on the farm homestead that they had, and it's just like an hour outside of town. But Steve was a wild guy. I mean, he built his own guitar, like invented his own guitars that like Eddie Van Halen used, and all this like crazy stuff. But he built the studio, which after Leon left the church in Tulsa, Steve Ripley took it over, I think he bought it like a few years after, but he.
So you're talking about the church that Leon was recording in.
The old Sheltered Records.
Yeah.
And so Ripley was in that for a while, and he was really close with Leon because like he was a lot younger and he was sort of working as an engineer for Leon, and that's how he kind of got into the whole music thing. But he moved out of the church years ago, and he built the studio out in where him and his wife lived. And anyways, unfortunately, he never really got to use it much before he passed away. I don't think he ever recorded a band in there. And so John was really close with him, and was like ready to make a record, and was like, guys, we need to make a record at Steve's. And at this time, it's like a lot of his equipment had been sold and stuff, so there wasn't like tons of studio gear there. But really great grand piano, and the room itself just sounds amazing. He kind of designed it to be like the church. And so my friend Jason Weinheimer from Little Rock drove down, and he brought a bunch of his gear, and we just set up for a week, and we cut this record there. And so that was really cool because it was just such a good vibe. And Steve's wife Charlene was really, really sweet, and like, she'd have like oatmeal prepared in the morning. It was just like
that's so
really
down
good, like,
home,
family
man.
vibe.
I love it.
So yeah, that's the latest kind of thing as far as sessions go. And I'm doing I'm back to doing the sort of weekly grind, which I've always liked, I haven't been touring much at all.
Like you play. I mean, is there when you say weekly grind, like a combination of live gigs and lessons, or gardening, or what is the weekly grind?
Oh yeah. Well, just like just playing the clubs around town.
I would love to walk into a local club and see Aycock in there. I mean, dude, that is sick. So there is a pulse. I'm sure they have.
There is a pulse.
Yeah.
There is a pulse, and I mean, I play. There's a couple bands that I play with mostly, and that's kind of like if I have a gig booked with them, like that's who I play with no matter what. But then if I'm free, there's a few other friends of mine that are like, man, anytime you're not playing, like, we want you to play with us. So like, it's really fun for me because I'm getting to play with a lot of my friends and like lots of different styles. So it keeps it really fresh and inspired. And so, yeah, I mean, you got to make a trip to Tulsa sometime because
Jesse, I'm talking like if you can, like, I mean, if you have a few gigs lined up, I feel like I need to get there. I mean, Jimmy Lee Keltner we are like well, Ripley, I remember him talking about, Kellner was talking about Ripley wanting to do this. Can't remember exactly what it was, some sort of benefit concert, but Keltner said, I can't do it. Or he didn't want to do it, and then eventually he didn't get the chance to see Ripley before he died. But there's a couple of badasses. Dude, this guy, Jimmy Karstein. Do you know Jimmy at all?
Of course. Jimmy's my favorite.
Oh,
man.
my. Dude, I did this. I'm going to send you that interview. It's still to this day one of my favorite interviews. And then the other guy who left us, Titan of Tulsa, is Chuck Blackwell. Who's obviously Leon's drummer.
Dude, yeah.
But, I mean, you're cut from the same cloth, man. Like, it's so cool. Like, that vibe. And then there's all these other cats. But here's my proposal. I'm thinking, can we just do a second set maybe next week and dedicate it to our peers and the Highway Butterfly, Neil Casal?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I just got another interview here, and I don't want to shortchange your relationship. I mean, that guy, I didn't know him that well. I caught him on the tail end in his cosmic circles around the Sundays, but that guy, his spirit is still with me, and I pray and hope that he's still with you too.
I think I believe he is,
yeah.
And we definitely should catch up more. There's a great connection between Karstein and Neil. There's a good story.
There is. Oh my God, there's a Karstein Neil story.
Oh yeah.
All right, yo, listen. We just cooked for 53 minutes. We'll do set 2 next week, and we will lead in with Karstein and Neely. All right.
And hey, did you say you interviewed Karstein?
I'm sending you that interview immediately, dude. It's my favorite interview of all time, dude.
Dude, he's a trip. It's so cool you interviewed him, and he's not always up for interviews. So good on you.
Yo, man, dude, he was his sickest line he was talking about. He was talking about Leon and Keltner when they first met, and he said they were chewing the fat. I freaking love that guy, man. He is I'm going to send you that right away.
Hey, and one thing too, just for your own enjoyment, you should, if you haven't already read it, get Don Nick's Road Stories and Recipes book.
Oh my, dude, is Don? Is he still with us or is he gone now?
That's a good question. I think he still may be around. I think he might, but dude, he was playing in Tulsa with all those guys. But this book, man, it's an easy read, but it's like at the end, all these musicians give their road recipes. But there is a Jimmy Karstein story in that book about him being on tour with the Yardbirds with Jimmy Page.
Yeah,
and it's dude, the story is insane. The whole book's amazing, but it's worth finding a copy.
Jesse, man, it is so great to connect with you, man, and we'll do this next. I'll reach out to you. I'll get this up later, but we'll do set 2 next week.
Sounds good, Jake. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, keep it happening, man. Much love and keep it happening. All right.
All right, you too.
Peace.
All right, love you, man.
Peace,
Bye.
man. Oh, man. Can't wait for set 2 with Jesse Aycock. We'll be back with Mark Egan after this.